There's a lot of pressure out there when you are coming to the TTRPG space or you're looking to play something like Dungeons & Dragons or Daggerheart. There is pressure that you are supposed to be some kind of actor. And frankly, that's just not true. But how can some of the things that actors learn in acting school help you in actually getting into role playing? We're not necessarily saying you got to be an actor, but can we learn from them a little bit? So listen up today because we've got a really interesting guest. We've got a great conversation and we got a lot to say on this subject. I think that gets outside of what you normally hear inside of this argument. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance, your Dungeons & Dragons podcast, where every week, Garrett and I take a ruler mechanic in the game of D&D that's lackluster or needs improvement, and we offer you advice on how to make your game around that rule more interesting or more fun. So, sharpen up those daggers, we're getting started right now. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance. I'm here with Garrett, as per the usual. Garrett, what's going on?
It's been a long week, but we're here. We're chatting.
Yeah. I love getting to we do this on Sunday mornings, so we get our recording going. I love Sunday mornings. It's a good time. And now today we have special guest Rich Frohman with us today to talk about our topic. Rich, what's going on?
How we doing, guys? Doing pretty great. It's been a great weekend. And I was on set this weekend, actually, shooting a film up in Connecticut. And just to let you guys know, I am running off of 2 hours of sleep, so I apologize.
Oh my God.
He's well caffeinated.
Yeah, we got him. We got him in here. He was looking a little groggy. We slammed a couple of espressos in him, and he's looking much better now.
Yeah, they saved me. Thank you, guys.
Well, we got to get you motivated. So as you guys know, well, first of all, Rich, we know that you're a professional actor, and so we brought you in today to talk about today's topic on role play and acting and not acting and all of that. But you also have played D&D with us in the past, and I'm excited to get into this topic with you. Why don't we read a comment first, like we always do, and we'll go from there. Well, I have a great comment from our show last week where we broadcast with the Faint Divinities. And Rachel was awesome on that podcast. And we had one commenter come in and say, this was an awesome and vital discussion. Thank you all for your insight and commentary. Thanks for that, by the way. He says, my daughter is a middle school librarian. Last year, students were asking if there was a D&D club on campus. This year, she started a D&D club and she had 16 students sign up. All were new players. She's dividing them into Wednesday groups and Thursday groups, and I just sent her a link to this podcast. I feel she will find your input most helpful. Okay, so number one, thanks for your generosity on that. That's really nice. Yeah. Two, I love hearing that, like middle schools and high schools are putting together these D&D clubs, and there's a lot of people signing up.
She's got 16 kids interested in it.
Yeah.
And that's middle school.
Yeah.
I didn't even think they were starting that young. That's incredible.
No, I know. It's really, really cool. And, I also think that just from our topic of, welcoming new players to the table and some things we're going to talk about today when it comes to like shedding cringe, the bravery of getting involved in a D&D club with these kids. Number one, it's a very different environment than it was when I was a kid. If you played D&D, you didn't really tell a lot of people that you played D&D, number one. You certainly didn't tell them you were interested in trying because that was like, you immediately put on a target.
I still don't tell people I play D&D.
No?
No, I do. Oh. But some of them look at me and they're just like, what?
I know. So this is a great thing. And I'm really happy to hear that, this is going on out there. I'd love to hear more about this, but good comment. We had a lot of comments on the podcast posting on YouTube this week. This is the one that I was, just kind of psyched about. It was like, good news. So cool for that. Thank you for posting that.
Yeah. Good luck to her. I hope, I hope the kids have fun.
Yeah. Keep us up to date. We want to know what's going on there.
Yeah. And in this digital world, it's nice to know that these kids are volunteering to get together and roll some dice and mess around.
Totally.
Get out of their shells. I love that.
Totally. For sure. So speaking of which, we have an interesting topic today that I'm excited to talk about because this is one we struggle with, I think. And last week we sort of skimmed the surface of that when we were talking with Rachel from the Faint Divinities about this notion of letting go of cringe. and being able to sort of get into character. Now, we didn't go deep into role play last week. We were talking more about welcoming new players to the table and letting them play their game. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about the nuances of how one role plays. And so, we have three perspectives here, right? So we've got Rich, you're an actor. You kind of dig in on one level. Garrett, you will always tell us that you're kind of like not down with that, right?
Exactly. I'm more the numbers kind of crunchy person. But since, we get together at the table, I let it drop every now and then.
Yeah, you get into it at certain moments, you know what I mean?
For sure.
But don't you kind of refer to yourself as a third person kind of role player?
Yeah, more so. And I think that's just because I don't open up as much, I think. And, I'm not like a professional actor.
Yeah. You prefer to like describe your actions from like an over camera view.
Yeah. More of like, like you said, third person, but getting into describing it more than actually first person, acting it.
Yeah.
Per se.
Well, one thing I'd like to point out about the basic sort of premise behind this podcast today is that the acting side of it is, I think, what scares a lot of people. And it's not acting, right? Being an actor, I think, brings a unique perspective. But for most people, they come, like you said, Garrett, they come into this seeing some of these larger, more theatrical shows, which I'm sure you'll talk about in a little bit. There's an intimidation factor there. And we want to I think our tack today is to kind of offer ways to get around that or to think about this in different ways so that you're not intimidated by that. But of course, Rich, you've got some good insight around that as well.
Yeah, I do want to start off today by saying something, though. I think that all these different styles, there is no one best style. I think that even the third person or the first person actor kind of view, like, these type of styles can complement each other because you bring certain stuff out in me when we play. Like, I tend to describe my actions more. And I think like I kind of bring some talky dialogue out of you.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And I think that's just how it should go. I mean, feed off of each other at the table.
Yeah.
If you've got that one person that doesn't want to, step into that acting full on speaking role, but get into it, that's where we bring up the drop cringe, fuck cringe that we talked about last week. Have fun, get into it.
Yeah, and there's no one right way to do it.
No.
Well, I think we should qualify what we mean by cringe and what we mean by fuck cringe when we say that, because I think, okay, so first of all, whenever we say something is cringe, we are basically saying that it does not fit into societal norms, whatever that means, on some level. And then all of a sudden we're worried about how we appear in front of people that might judge us by saying that that's cringe or that's awkward or whatever. So this has always been at the heart of this game on some level. The idea of imagining yourself running around as a fighter in the woods with a sword, or a magician that can, a wizard that can cast spells. There is something that is far outside of the reality of societal norms that, we embrace imagination, we embrace play, we embrace what it was like to be a child again on some level and become that character, right? And so a lot of people now see that as like, oh, that's weird. They kind of don't like that. So when we're talking about cringe, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about being okay and owning the fact that, look, this is where I want to be. That my imagination is my imagination, and I would like to live in that world for a little while. Maybe that's my form of escape, and I'm going to be okay with that. And I don't, either you should be too, or I don't care if you're not, one way or the other. So I think that's the first thing.
Yeah, I mean, the self-expression that can come from that as well, of just not really giving a crap and just expressing yourself truthfully in this moment.
Right. There's also something that is, and you and I talked about this a little bit, Rich, and Garrett, this is something we've all talked about, and that's this. And you see a lot of this on the internet. We see a lot of videos and commentary on this about this acting is not role play, right? We see a lot of people running these videos. There's a lot of clickbaity videos out there, some of which make decent points, but character immersion and being your character is not necessarily just the acting part of it, right? And I want to make that delineation. Most of these people that are saying this on these YouTube videos and these TikToks that are saying acting is not role play, fine. What I'd like to say is, well, it can be part of it, right?
I mean, it 100% is part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, these acting principles will 100% make you a better role player. But I think these point of views come from people who probably haven't acted, right? And they're like, our table's pretty great. We don't need actors to make our table great. And I think it comes from that kind of negative place when they make those videos.
Well, but I think they're right. They don't need actors to make their game great at all.
No, you don't.
No.
Not at all. But it definitely won't hurt.
Garrett, you had some thoughts on this about how immersion and role play and becoming your character doesn't necessarily rely on that.
Yeah, I to get a little motivation for today's topic, I looked up just what is role playing. And just the definition online is just the act of pretending to be a character and behaving in a way that character would. And then it went into a deeper thing about role-playing games. And it's more of a decision. It can be acting and getting into a voice or whatever, but it's more about the decision-making process of that character. Not what would I do? What would my character do?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think in the game that's more what it needs to evolve around.
Well, sure. And I think one of the big divisions that I saw, and this is where I'm probably going to get spanked by Rich a little bit because Rich has an education in acting, I do not. But one of the big divisions that I saw is acting assumes that there is an audience because you are creating a performance that is outward. Role playing is an immersion into a character. Now, there are versions of acting, I believe. I think method acting is part of this, where you believe you are the character. Is this right? Am I on the right track here?
Controversial. Bad acting is outward. Good acting is inward.
Oh.
Anytime you do character work in a professional acting space, you speak from, I am doing this when you're talking about the character.
Right.
The character is you. You do your character work beforehand. You talk about the whys, why they are the way they are, why they make certain actions. And then when you get in that moment that you're listening and role playing intently, right? That's the doing of acting, listening and reacting truthfully, right? But when you've done the character work, you have organic thoughts in that moment from the character's perspective, if you did enough character work. And that's the difference between you making decisions and your character making decisions.
Gotcha. And you know what? There's something out there I saw once. I was not prepared with this information for the talk today, but you're reminding me of something. But I saw what appeared to be a satirical interview with Sir Ian McKellen. And what he says is, in his sort of very Gandalfian voice, is he's like, what I do when I act is I pretend to be the person I'm supposed to be. And the person who's interviewing him is just looking at him like, well, yeah, no shit, of course. And it comes off as fun, but then he goes, no, you don't understand. Because there is a simplicity to that. He is basically saying that acting is, or that role playing is acting, right? Let's reverse that. Not acting is role playing, but role playing is acting. And that's is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because you are believing in that moment that you are this character. Because your mind, when you tell it things like that, can't differentiate between what you're telling it and the truth. And that causes these feelings to come up genuinely.
Oh, I love that.
Like up here, up in your mind, you know the difference,
Right.
There's a difference between you in real life and you and this character in this moment. But your heart and the way you feel can't tell the difference.
Okay. And I love what I love about this is that in the TTRPG space, the stat sheet, your character sheet, now becomes a sort of data block to help inform that space that we're supposed to get into, Garrett, that you're always talking about is like role playing is really just taking this thing that is described here and behaving in a way that is true to that thing.
Yeah, so what you were saying is you become that character. I want to make a delineation to these people, right? We are only ever going to be ourselves. You're only ever going to be Todd. You're only ever going to be Garrett. I'm only ever going to be Rich, right? But when we role play like this, or when we play characters in movies, you're finding that character inside of you. So that's what makes good actors, right? You bring that part of yourself that you have to find when searching this character out, and you bring it. And that's what makes your interpretation of a character different from mine.
Well, yeah. And as any, like when I teach my art students, in a lot of ways, the artist is a filter that filters the world that they internalize through them. So the work that we're seeing obviously belongs to them. And the same principle, I would assume, applies to how you are only you, but the character that you internalize and become and pretend to be is filtered through you. So when we see 5 different actors play the same part, we're going to have flavors of those characters that are slightly different based on those filters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why certain people get casted. At that top level, most people are great actors.
Right.
But the way they color it through their body and through their existence, it gets certain people casted in certain roles and whatnot.
Yeah. So I love that point. And I feel like we are inundated with negative commentary on the internet that acting is not role playing. We see this over and over again. And my thinking is that commentary, here comes my controversial point that's probably going to fire a few people up. That commentary comes from people that don't understand acting or don't have a firm education in theater arts, right?
I think it's mainly clickbait. Okay. I think the reason people bring that up is to get views.
Right. But now let's be fair to the people out there that don't want to bring acting into their game, or that feel like acting doesn't have to be present to play this game, because that's the majority of people, right? I mean, in a lot of respects, this backlash that we're experiencing right now comes from the effects of Dimension 20 and Critical Role, right? Which are hugely entertaining. And they are not, and I think they put a lot of pressure on people who are coming to the game for the first time and discovering D&D through them. And then they sit down at a table and they realize, oh, wait a minute, this is not like sitting on an episode of Critical Role.
Yeah, I look at Critical Role and Dimension 20. They are productions. They are feeding to an audience. I mean, they're professionals. It's what they do. But I mean, your table doesn't have to perform at that level, and you shouldn't feel crappy if you're not, the next Sam Riegel or something. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're coming at it at a different level, and to jump into this, game and thinking to yourself, I have to be them. That doesn't have to be what you do.
Yeah. My nitpicky language side of this whole conversation would say that I would change the word level that they're coming at it from to more of like a spectral band of left to right, because I feel like there's a side of this that can be highly analytical and crunchy and detailed oriented. And then there's a side of this that can be all the way over on the role play side of this that is much more fluid and based in a kind of, like method acting or maybe improvisational acting. And both of those games are absolutely valid, but one's not a higher level game than the other.
100%.
But I think we make it that way because we put value on the power that Critical Role and Dimension 20 have, and they do, and they should. They're fantastic to watch. I enjoy them.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, for sure, I completely agree with that point. But we also got to keep in mind that these games are structured very differently than your average game. They are sometimes scripted. They have certain episodes in a season. They have certain character arcs they want to hit. And these actors, they talk about it beforehand.
Well, yeah, but I'm going to push back a little bit there because I feel like, there's always been there's another clickbaity thing that goes around. It's like, is Critical Role scripted? And
I was going to say that, yeah.
And my what's your knee-jerk reaction to that? Because I have one.
I say no. I kind of side with the people that it's not scripted. But on what Rich was just saying, I think they have points that they want to hit in there. And I think, off table, I could see them saying, mention this or, put this in there so that it feeds on their improv.
Well, they need pacing.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And any good GM or DM is going to build pacing into their game and have milestones that they want to get to. So I feel like that's just part of playing the game and being efficient with time. I'm going to say it absolutely is not scripted. And here's why. I feel like, and this is something that I've been focusing my research on around the sort of the storytelling component of the TTRPG space is that we're in an era with the sort of explosion of interest in these types of games. We are in an era where storytelling is being redefined. It's being redefined because typically storytelling was the job of a singular person, right? There was either somebody who was the historian, there was somebody who was the storyteller around the campfire, there was somebody who was the author of the book. But now we are looking at an entirely new genre of storytelling that is a collaborative, chance operations outcome that can't be seen. And so to me, I feel like the people at Critical Role, and this is what spawned a new game. This is what spawned Daggerheart, which I think we should talk about in another podcast. But the whole purpose of Daggerheart coming out of Critical Role and Darrington Press was to enhance the narrative, enhance the fiction, make the flow move better. Well, what do the people on Critical Role do? As voice actors and trained actors and people that are really good at improv, they're going to move through that story with a fluidity that is that of the professional. Okay, so they make a game that sort of helps to enhance that aspect of it because they know not everybody is an actor necessarily. So, okay, fair play. But what we wind up with from that is a lot of pressure on people that come to the space that don't have that skill set. And so we wind up with a lot of backlash. We wind up with a lot of negativity that's going to say, but I'm not an actor. And then frankly, I don't like to behave like that. How can I still play this game? And as we know, you can, right? But I think my point here is that because they're professionals at what they do, their grasp on this new emerging narrative storytelling has a level of expertise about it that they, of course, we're going to criticize them and say, oh, that's got to be scripted. But I'd say, no, I don't think it's scripted. I think that, somebody who practices something long enough and well enough is going to get really good at doing that. And that's just exactly what happens there.
Yeah, I think scripted is completely wrong. But I do think there is a framework when it comes to pacing and when it comes to audience and when it comes to appealing to the masses. I think that's the only delineation.
Right. And I mean, we could hash this out all day long and we're probably all correct on one level or another. But
yeah.
So, I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of, well, there's a couple of things I thought about. So I did see a video where Ginny D was talking about this notion of character backstory and personality, giving the character a personality. And she talks about this really well. But one of the things that she brings up in this, and it goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago, is that the personality is both, I think she says something to the effect of, she talks about character backstory as a fabric, and we need to look at the threads in that fabric and how they add up to create like a personality. So, she talks about this idea of an internal and external. It's like what's going on inside versus what's going on outside, and how the contrast between those two things can really make for a deeply interesting character, right? Now, Rich, you said a minute ago that we're only going to be ourselves, and that we've kind of function as a filter through which to pass that character through. That's a great way to find the line between what's inside and what's outside.
Exactly.
So, how do you? I've got a couple of examples of how I think that works, but what comes to mind in your mind about acting with those two differences, the internal and the external?
So the internal is done way before you come to sit down and actually do the acting. The internal is done beforehand, and you start, from generally the beginning, and you keep asking why. Why does this character act this way? And why was that? And then why is that? And just asking simply why will lead you down a discovery that will bring you really close to this character.
But Garrett, like when you talk about it from the non-acting side of it and getting into character, like how do you imagine yourself, becoming that character?
I kind of feed, I think, a little off of the backstory on my characters. I come up with an idea of, where did this person come from, or what do they want to do? What do they want to, see? And I think it definitely helps at the table, other players adding their character into it, I guess. And I guess that would unlock myself, open up a little bit get into character, because I'm not going to act out my character or anything like that. But if we're in a bar together, I think that helps my character open up and try to role play a little better, I guess. Yeah. I know I'm kind of just like rambling on a little bit, but it's like trying to get into my character. I guess I struggle with it a little bit until other people get into theirs, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't think of it immediately. It's more of I feed off of the other players at the table. And I'm like, okay, what would my character do in this scenario? Or if, we're talking with an NPC or something in game. So
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you find that like you kind of wait for those moments to see what the other characters at the table are like? And then you kind of think like, okay, storytelling wise, what kind of character would fit well and mesh well with this group? Is that what you're saying?
That's maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit, but I think it's just more of just opening up my personality or whatever and just trying to put it into that character. I don't know. I usually play characters that are, I think, more reserved because that's myself.
Yeah.
And then just, trying to put myself out there a little more.
Well, okay, so I have a theory here, though, that might help tie this together, Garrett, because I think you're talking about this from the standpoint of sitting in a bar, meaning the hypothetical role-playing bar, the storyline bar, and you wait to see what the other party members do so that you can ask yourself, well, what would I do? But my thought here is this. When it comes to just general social inhibition, when we're at work, like, all right, for example, I love to play these games, right? And I'm going to describe myself playing these games. I'm going to go with maybe 3 different ways, depending on what social setting that I'm in. So 1, you guys roll up in my driveway, we're in the backyard, we're getting ready to kind of go in and play. And, I might be like, all right, you motherfuckers, let's go inside and roll some dice. We'll pull out some, like I'm going to kind of, just kind of yell at you and be completely uninhibited. I probably won't pull out a sword and kill you all, but it's going to be the type of thing we're going to be uninhibited. I'm standing in front of a classroom of students and someone says, hey, I heard you play D&D. I'm like, yeah, I love to play D&D. I've been playing it for almost all my life. I really enjoy, the role play. I really enjoy the storytelling. I feel like it's, a really great space to be in my spare time. Or I'm sitting around a conference table with my colleagues at the college and someone says, I heard you play D&D. And I might say something along the lines of, yeah, I find role play and the games of Dungeons and Dragons and other TTRPGs to be fantastic teaching tools that help me dig deeply into my research. So there's 3 versions of me saying, I play Dungeons and Dragons. So the point I'm trying to make here and how this might tie the two of it together for the two of you is, Garrett, are you confusing hearing other people play the game and deciding what your character do with just being in the company of the people you feel comfortable with and allowing yourself to feel like that character?
I mean, that's a good point. Because I guess, that's when I would open up, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Being around the other people that are acting or role playing, or like you were just saying, hanging out with that group of people. It's going to make me open up a little more than if I'm talking with a colleague about it. It's like, yeah, I play Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm not going to go any further than that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and I did some, I'm certainly not a medical researcher by any means, but I was looking into, certain psychology journals about how behavioral inhibition functions in general in the prefrontal cortex and how we're trained as human beings in the areas of, like if I want to succeed as a member of society, I have to control certain motor functions. Like I'm not going to walk down the street whipping and flailing my arms about because, I just don't have any inhibition. So our brain's ability to control us on some level functions in a variety of ways for a variety of reasons. And when you set foot in the Three Ducks Tavern, getting ready to play the game, you are now in a space that your brain says, okay, it's all right to do the following. And those inhibitions are lifted, hopefully. Right?
Yeah. I wanted to add to a point that you said, Todd. You were speaking on how you kind of code switch when you're in different environments. And I think I can relate it back to Garrett because I think you were kind of saying that you learn about your character by discovering how they react to certain environments. Because like in real life, Todd, you learn about how you feel about your colleagues and those kind of things by how you feel you need to respond in those kind of environments. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that leads into another point I wanted to talk about how role-playing gets easier in a campaign the longer you sit with this character.
Mm-hmm.
Because the more experiences you go through in this character's first-person perspective, the easier it is to call upon previous memories as that character and have these in-moment thoughts relating to the past and how they would make you feel in the present.
Yeah, I can totally agree on that. I mean, the character that we've been playing recently at the table, we've had quite a few sessions now. I mean, 30 or so.
Yeah.
And I feel like, now I'm finally like, I'm realizing like, what does this character want to do? It's starting to like unlock it. And I'm like, giving more of a like really focused like opinion. Am I playing this character the way that it should go kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Not just going with the flow. It's like, what are we doing kind of thing?
Yeah.
And exactly what you said. I think as you progress along, it unlocks more.
I mean, there were so many milestone moments for you, finding out how your character responds to the situations he's put in.
Mm-hmm.
And then that infers how you're going to respond to future events and grow from it.
And I'm not going to lie, as a DM or GM, I have a little bit of PC envy in this because as the GM, I'm introducing NPCs all the time, right? Some of those you're going to have for a hot second at the table for one night and then they're gone. And of course, there are others that linger depending on how long you're in a particular environment, but they don't get to find out that same discovery that the both of you are talking about here. They, my ability to develop them on that deep level is tough. And when I can, you seem to like them a lot better because now I'm sort of being able to call and response with you guys in a way that gives them some depth and they're allowed to build. So it's harder for me, but I watch you do it and I'm like, damn, I really want an NPC that's going to come along and be like a beloved NPC for the group, which means time and reaction.
Well, it's character development.
Yeah,
it's ultimately what it is. I mean, it's in novels, it's in movies, it's in whatever. One of the things that I watched, to get a little inspiration on this podcast was a video from Matt Colville. It was all on role playing, and he goes into that talking about Lord of the Rings, Star Wars. The main characters, like in the beginning, Luke in Star Wars. His character arc is so simple. I'm on a desert planet. What am I going to do? And then it's like he's offered this, adventure. He denies it. But then it's like, what does it get? How does he progress further? Well, the storyline, his aunt and uncle are burned alive. And then he's like, okay, I got to save the world.
Right.
Type thing.
Right.
It's character progression.
Well, that's
there's
also
an inciting incident.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing you just described here is also, a classic storytelling archetype known as the hero's journey, which, it's sort of like Luke stands on the precipice of adventure. His ordinary life is completely surrounding him and something pushes him off the precipice.
It's like, how do you let that go?
Correct.
What is it that makes you?
And so I think this is a critical tool in backstory development for us as players of this game is like, ask yourself, what pushed you off the precipice and out into the world of adventure? Because if, you're a hero, I mean, you're basically playing a hero, and we could look at the hero's journey as an archetype for our backstory and what it is we hope to accomplish going forward. Yeah. Especially when you're trying to set goals with your GM.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really, really powerful thing to say. Another thing I was going to say on the Matt Colville note, not that I'm thinking or quoting that same video, but you bring up Luke Skywalker, and I kind of begin to think about how some of the more interesting characters, and I just did a video on this. I just posted a video of this to the Wither and Bloom Studios channel about this idea of creating tension and conflict in the world. In order to sort of build a framework that you can have your characters jump off of. Well, that same conflict, I think, is brilliant when it appears within the character. Some of my favorite characters in storylines, well-known storylines, are the ones that have that conflict. Look at Gollum and Smeagol. Look at Severus Snape in Harry Potter, like how you always believe Severus Snape is kind of on the edge of being evil, and then you find out it was just because he loved Harry's mom. Darth Vader. Luke always believed he could come back from the dark side, that he was in there somewhere, right? And then I go into a couple others, like Jaime Lannister's a favorite of mine from Game of Thrones.
God,
that's a guy,
character,
right? that's a guy that's like the worst fucker, and then he's like the most lovable person. It's like the world of Jamie as Brienne of Tarth, and then the world of Jamie that, you know, knocked what's his name out of the tower, the Stark kid, Bran Stark, out of the tower. Mm-hmm. So there's like, you know, if you can encompass in your character somehow your own inner struggle between good and bad. You've done this. You've been in a conversation with someone. You walk away, at least if you have a soul. Some of you out there probably have never experienced this, but you have a conversation with someone and you walk away from it and you're driving your car and you're like, oh God, should I have said that? Was that am I an asshole?
Yeah, you sit up at 3 a.m. in your bed, you're like, fuck. Right.
And that's because you're having a struggle with, you know, you have empathy. You're saying, oh my God, did I do something awful there? Good. Mm-hmm. Take that struggle between good and bad and build that into that character. Yeah. That's where the depth is.
Mm-hmm. I want to touch on that for a second because you tickled something in my brain.
Excellent.
Because as an actor and as like a media observer, there is nothing better than playing or observing a character that does bad things because bad things were done to them, but still strives to be better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Having that person not only like heal themselves through actions that prove that they are better than what happened to them, but just, oh my God, it's the best experience, having that turn the corner. You know what I mean?
Well, but let's just go back to the hero's journey, because the reason why we identify with the hero's journey is not because we're going to bring down the fucking empire and come home we're going to come home as the Jedi to save the world. No, we don't see ourselves as the chosen one, but our own inner struggle, right, to do better is that on a smaller scale, and we identify with that. In other words, we see the large Luke Skywalker as a capital H hero, our own desire to do better because bad things were done to us. That's our own hero's journey right there.
Yep. And
right.
we all go through it in our life.
Yeah.
And seeing that it can be accomplished through these mediums,
right,
is all the more motivating. That's why people fall in love with these characters.
Right. Because honestly, at the end of the day, if you as a person have had bad things done to you, and then you in turn did bad things to someone else, and you say, oh my God, I've got to be a better person. I'm going to be a better person. You work on being a better person. And at the end of the day, you come out of it being that better person. You recognize how you overcame what happened to you. Well, guess what? That you just defeated Voldemort, right? Mm-hmm. That you just slayed the dragon.
You, in a more serious terms, you stopped generational trauma.
Well, yeah, you did.
That's how you heal.
That's how you heal.
That's how the world becomes a better place.
So if we can take these things and build them into that character, and this is where I think the division is, right? I love that point you made before about how we can only be ourselves. And then we're going to internalize that character. We can be the child that runs around with the stick as the sword and the board as the shield. With a really good sense of play and imagination, we're going to internalize and become that character. And through us, that character helps us become the hero through which we can heal.
Yes. I love the way you put that.
Well, you got me there. This whole conversation. I mean, it's the beauty of doing these things, right? Is we kind of get to a point. And on that note, we need to take a break, right? We need to take a quick break, tell you guys some things out there to listen. We got some more things for you when we come back, though. Don't worry. And
don't go anywhere.
That's Rich's ASMR moment for you. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. I just wanted to reach out for a minute and tell you how much we love what we do. First of all, Wither and Bloom Studios loves making Dungeons and Dragons content. And all of us here, and there's quite a few of us, we all have different angles that we want to take this from. This means that we can provide for you a really diverse channel with lots of different content. And you probably know that already, but I just wanted to throw that out there to you. Now, Garrett and I on iCast Guidance work really hard at developing these conversations and possibly even collaborating with others. And we're looking to you for a little bit of support. Now, we have set up a Patreon at patreon.com/Wither and Bloom Studios. If you head over there, you can check out what we've got available. And for the simple price of like a cup of coffee per month, you can help us continue to make this material happen. We offer a whole bunch of great perks, so we're excited to get those to you. Those things include like monthly newsletters, downloadable PDF homebrew content that you can play in your game, Discord roles, shout outs, all kinds of stuff.
So we're asking if you would come along for the ride. Also, when it comes to monetization on these channels and these types of things, it's hard. It's really hard to do. Oftentimes you think, well, if you just hit it in terms of views, you're just going to go buy a yacht. Well, number one, we could give a shit about a yacht. We don't really want that. But number two, it's the type of thing that when other advertisers get into your space, they oftentimes can tell you what they want, and we don't want that. We'd rather be supported by you guys, the D&D community. We don't want a bunch of corporate people, kind of making decisions about what we make our content about. So help us out. And the more you do, the more we're going to be able to bring you. And I'm looking forward to actually making a whole bunch more of this downloadable content for you guys. So go over to patreon.com/Wither and Bloom Studios and grab yourself a membership, and then jump into the Discord and say hi and tell us what's going on and tell us what you want to see. We can't wait to sort of get aligned with you guys a little bit better and hearing about what you want us to make. So let's get back to this topic for today, and we will be talking to you soon. Thank you. All right, we're back. I got to tell you guys, I'm really, really enjoying this conversation. I feel like I'm actually learning. This is the thing about doing the podcast that I love so much, is I learn things about the topic as we go. I do all this research, for quite a bit of time. I make tons of notes. We come in here to this podcast. I don't read 2/3 of the notes. We organically develop so much stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, because I'm getting a lot out of this. You reminded me of something on the break that happened in one of our gaming sessions that really, really contributes to this conversation. And I think I want to talk about it. I have to admit that I was wrong in the middle of this conversation, which I don't have a problem doing, but there's a lot of people that do. But what do you got for us? Start us off, Rich.
Yikes, we're coming in hot after the break. Okay. Yeah, so one of our earlier sessions in Atania, one of our players, Olivia, couldn't make the session, which means her character had to step out for a second. And that being said, our characters' backstories were intertwined, and Tryphon had a protective nature about him with that character and kind of was hired to look after her. Now, with her being gone and missing, Todd kind of expected the party to just accept that for plot's sake and for his plan's sake, in a sense. And I, as an actor, took that like, no, this is gold character motivation. Tryphon in this moment would be searching for Remy at any costs. He would not stop looking due to the severity of the consequences and of losing her.
Right.
So in this moment, I it's so funny because I spent the whole session looking for Remy, and I did not realize that Todd was just bubbling up the entire session with frustration because we did not touch anything he wanted us to touch.
Well, again, listen, so there's a lot of moving parts here. Number one, if I'm not mistaken, Olivia's decision to not play in that game did not come with a lot of advance notice. I don't know how long it was she gave us, but as a DM, I did not have a lot of time to plan for that.
Understandable.
I don't even think you knew coming into the game that she wasn't going to be here. So all of a sudden you come into the game, boom, gone. Okay, not a lot of time to prepare. That being said, I was bubbling up, I think, because a couple of things were happening. You were getting into character, and I was focusing on the various waypoints I needed to hit in the story to move the story forward. And you were running around screaming Remy as if like you'd find her like behind a tree somewhere. And what happened was, and this is the part where I was wrong. This is the part where I have to sort of own up and say I messed up, because I bubbled over, right? Mm-hmm. I was like, all right, stop. You are not going to find this character. You're driving me freaking bananas.
Right? Yeah, you're like, I don't know what to do with this. You are now fighting your party members. What do I do with this?
You were fighting the party members. And I was just like, what is going on? We have a character dip for one session and you're going out of your mind. And so I lost it. We kind of had to take a break because I like really lost it. And Garrett, you actually came in so like the mediator.
I remember, I don't remember exactly, but I remember I looked at it from like a third point of view because I don't think I was really deep into the role playing of, Tryphon trying to find this lost character or anything like that. But the party started to divide and split, and then Todd boiled over, and, we had our little step away break. And I was like, he's just playing his character. He's getting deep into the role play. This is what his character would do.
Right. And I got to tell you, this was I had an epiphany in that moment. You made me see the light, number one. And I learned something. You were going to say something.
Yeah, no, Garrett, you also stopped and said, because Todd was like, nothing has happened this session. And you said, so much has happened this session. This is one of the most entertaining sessions we've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, it was so deep into role play, and I mean, this went on for hour plus, right? If I'm not wrong,
bordering on the 2-hour mark. Yeah,
it was just, so deep.
Yeah, but you got to remember that, there's a certain amount of pressure on the DM, or at least maybe not across the board, but I feel this pressure. I feel a certain pressure a certain responsibility to move the story forward, right? And I felt. And in my planning for that night, and here's where every DM makes a mistake. It's like you do all this planning, it doesn't go the way you want it to go. And what do you do? Okay, so yeah, I've been through that a million times. I get that. You're always joking about getting on a boat because you want to mess with me. I get that. But the point here is that for some reason, this one just didn't seem to have it. We were stuck in the same spot. You're fighting the party members. And I'm like, and what happened in that moment was a good role-playing session butted heads. It crashed into the mechanical crunchiness of moving the game forward. And I felt helpless in that moment. And so, Garrett, when you said no, a lot has happened here. Tryphon or Rich is just playing Tryphon as Tryphon would act. I stopped and thought about that, and I was like, wait a minute, I just figured something out. I really learned about how to let go. Number one, as a DM, how to let go and kind of let you play your game. And I think I've always been pretty good at that on a lot of levels, but this was one of those times where it's straight into a territory I had never been. And I don't know what I thought was wrong with that situation, but it just, maybe I had too many nitrates in my ham sandwich that day.
Yeah.
I think it took it out of your control, and it was more.
I don't want to have control.
Yeah, but I think you were lost a little bit because it was just so table driven in that scenario.
There you go.
It was fear.
Well, no, I like this part about how it was table driven, right? Because it's sort of like if you were one of the pantheon of Greek gods, you're Zeus looking down upon your creation. And all of a sudden, because you allowed the people to have free will, they're now able to go do things outside of your control. And you're like, oh my God, they're becoming too powerful. They're going to overthrow me.
I love that perspective.
Yeah. Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. But I will say this, I learned so much in that moment about being a DM that, number one, as a DM, who wouldn't want their table to just go and take over?
It takes so much off of you.
Oh my God. Yeah, it does. And that's where the true collaborative storytelling begins to emerge. Where, this is an example where true role playing, and I don't mean the acting side, because we got to get back to that in this conversation. You were just being exactly who you saw that character as being, and you were reacting to the moment that was presented to you at the table in the way you should have. That is gold. That's gold.
Well, let's talk about what made this moment special, right? Tryphon was going after his wants and his needs in that moment. He wanted to find Remy because he needs to protect her and he needs to get her home safe, or he loses the last bit of family he has left.
Right.
And what makes good storytelling is conflict. So there's that conflict going on inside of Tryphon. But what made that episode special was the conflict in the party that was created, because some members of the party wanted to get other things done, did not want to search after Remy incessantly, but Tryphon needed to. And that's what makes good storytelling. Every script has characters in a scene going after their wants and needs. But when those wants and needs conflict, you have entertaining stories. That's all it is.
Well, I think what we mean, I would kind of come in and substitute the notion of entertaining stories with substantive stories that have depth and feel real, right? I mean, because that's, I think, the location where for me, if I'm going to use the word entertainment at all, and I mean, it's gameplay, right? Gameplay is meant to be entertaining. It's like, I take it very seriously, but I also really enjoy it. And that enjoyment could be interpreted as entertaining, and that entertaining could be interpreted as, depth, because I want depth out of that. And so, that's what you're getting. You're getting that depth from that conflict, right?
In that moment, right? Creating good storytelling and following your wants and needs, right? It relates to this video I saw online where they made a point to say, remember, the story isn't about you. Look out for the party and the party storytelling as a whole, and make sure, be aware of that, and make sure things are passed around evenly. I think that goes in a dangerous direction, because that gets you looking out, getting away from your character's perspective and what they would do, and gets you looking at the game as a game. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, because what that does is it subverts true character immersion in the name of the collaboration, which I'm technically for both of those things. However, if you're really going to be in character and the character's needs and desires in any given moment conflict with the needs and desires of the party, well, as long as we're not having any session zero violations in what those needs and desires are, we're probably doing the right thing, I would think.
Exactly. And following those wants and needs are going to leave you to some scenes where you're not really invested. You're not doing much in that scene.
Yeah.
And you kind of take a back seat.
Yeah.
But when you're meant to take a front seat, you're taking a front seat as well. And if all the party members at the table are in agreement of that, you're going to have a really copacetic experience. But that needs to be talked about beforehand, because sometimes some people can take it like, oh, I'm not getting enough spotlight, or this person is hogging whatnot.
Yeah, the let me have my moment thing, which we'll talk about at a future podcast, but the let me have my moment aspect of this is certainly part of it, right?
Yeah, I think we've run into that at our table before, where it's just, we get a little...
Well, we got to make sure it's, this is what my character wants to do versus this is what I want to do as a person. Whether you feel like, all right, you know what, Garrett needs some spotlight right now. Let me do something. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like there's this big fat modulation dial. That dial vacillates, or that dial tunes between you as the individual person and the character. And how can you tune your dial for the right mix of, in order to be a good role player and a good immersive role player, you want that dial to be tilted more in the realm of the character. It can never be all or nothing, right? I think a true TTRPG person is never going to be all themselves or all the character. There's going to be a blend in there somewhere, right? But that dial should be turned a little bit more towards the character, obviously, and remember and remind themselves, or at least ask themselves, when the thing they're doing is them and not who the character is, right? And see if that needs to be checked on some level.
I love that, because it's never black and white. This is a spectrum.
Correct.
We are still acting here. There is a level of difference between real life and acting and role playing.
Yeah. I want to cover, we're going to be running out of time pretty soon. And there is a couple more things. There's one more thing in particular I want to talk about really quickly, because I think it's important. And I think it gets to solutions, because that's one of the things this podcast is about solutions for how to make your game better inside of this world. And so what do we do on both sides of this spectrum, where we're either into more crunch and we're into more, immersive storytelling through, this is my sheet, I'm going to become this individual, but, I'm going to tell it my own way, or we get more into this side of things where it's sort of like the role playing is the acting, and we completely absorb that character and become that character on all aspects. There's this idea in improvisational techniques called yes and, right? I mean, you've probably seen this before, especially if you've explored any of those videos out there that tell you that, you need to do this. You don't need to do this. But I would say this, the yes and principle is really important, whatever side of this spectrum you're on. Rich, the yes and principle, what does that basically sort of embody?
That means, like, if we're in an improv scenario and you go ahead and say something like, Garrett, your appointment was today. Oh my God, you're late. If Garrett's like, I don't have an appointment, you're wrong. that just completely takes the wind out of the sails for that moment. You know what I mean? And in a D&D sense, it has to make sense.
Right.
It's not going to, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.
Right. And it's funny, as you said that to Garrett, I looked over and nobody can obviously see this because this is an audio podcast, but Garrett all of a sudden, like his head spun around. He's like, what are you talking about? I didn't have an appointment.
Shit.
But the yes and principle, if Garrett had adopted the yes and principle, he just would have looked at you and been like, I'm sorry, I overslept. I was out late last night. I was on a shoot and there was this whole thing with so all of a sudden, Garrett dives in because he's like, I didn't have an appointment. But the yes and principle, let's take it out of improv for a minute. The yes and principle also goes to this mode of design thinking. And that's this. In design thinking, we are usually facing some kind of problem or some kind of existing situation that needs improvement. Okay, now that might not be the situation at your table, but bear with me. What we do with that is we throw everything at the wall and we decide to see what sticks. And even if something seems like it's way outside of the realm of possibility, we do not automatically shut it off by saying, no, that would never work. We bring that in as well. We're probably only going to be bringing in things that are, like we may charge everybody with going way out on a limb and thinking outside of the box, but everything gets thrown against the wall and we say, yes, all of this. Now, what do we have? What's working? That absurd thing that we probably would have shut off as being impossible could have something in it that we never would have considered had we not looked at it at all. In D&D, or in any tabletop role-playing game situation, that's kind of what we do at the table as a whole, right? Because I, as GM or DM, am going to react to what you're doing at the table when the table's kind of doing its thing. And I have to be able to say, yeah, okay, let's do something with that. If I'm the type of, or worse, if you're the type of DM or GM that knee-jerk reactions a no to everything at your table, no one wants to play with you, okay? You're no fun.
The rule of cool is real.
I like it when we get close to the mics. But the point here is that if the players adopt that too, right? We all know we want the DM to kind of be a yes and kind of person. But if the players adopt yes and everything can be on the table, at least for consideration, it opens the game up to a more flavorful situation. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do everything that everyone wants. That's not going to be a fun game. But don't automatically default to no.
Yeah, because if you're kind of like going out on a limb, let's say like Garrett hasn't talked in a while, and he like walks up to my character and is like, "Oh, Tryphon, your fur is like miscolored right here. What happened?" Like, you just wanted to start a conversation, maybe. Like, if I'm like, Garrett, my fur is not miscolored. That's wrong. Don't talk to me. Like, that's gonna shut you down. That's going to create a negative environment. You want to encourage people to live in the moment and get involved. And you know what I mean?
I think that's where what we were talking about earlier, that I feed off of the table a little more. I think I work on that principle a little bit. Where like you'll come up to me and you'll say something and then I will start to narrate and open up a little more. So I think that works, in coming from my perspective.
Yeah, that happened a lot in our game too. I knew it consciously that like, all right, I can get Garrett going if I go up to him and say something.
Yeah, well, there was one scenario where I did want to kill you, where you like totally dropped a girl on me at the bar and you tried to like, riz me up a little bit. And I'm like, I'm gonna kill you.
I was your fucking wingman,
No,
dude.
yeah, I was just not, my character wasn't ready for that one.
But the conflict there was beautiful.
But we went with it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I love the way you put that with the example of if you walk up, if, somebody walks up to you and says your fur is discolored and you're not going to say, no, it's not. You're going to act. Because what we're really talking about here is in that moment, Garrett with Branmorn tried to initiate something with you. And the yes and principle allows that initiation to happen, right? Whether or not it becomes a major aspect of your backstory or it momentarily defies what your character's about, go with it, because there could be something in that interaction. However impossible you might initially think it should be, there might be something in that interaction that leads to, there's a nugget there that grows. That's what's important.
And I think this leads back to one of your favorite sayings, and one of my favorite things you say, Todd, is that no creativity happens in a vacuum.
Right.
And that is the blessing of this new form of storytelling. Like you said, in the past, it was always individual. But with the group storytelling, there is so much fluid creativity flowing into this pot in the middle that we're creating. And there is so much to work off of.
I think you could not have said it. You could not have summed up the content of this podcast better, because that's really what it's about. Is if we're going to get to the heart of role play and how to genuinely immerse ourselves in the character, whether you do it through the lens of the crunch or the actor, whatever you do, if you adopt this kind of all-encompassing yes and attitude for what gets thrown on that table, then your storytelling is going to have both. It's going to invite you in as players, right? The reactions and that yes and, it's going to validate you, right? It's going to validate you, and that validation is going to give you sort of a positive feedback loop that's going to get you deeper into that character space. And that's where the storytelling happens. I love that.
Yes, it's a beautiful, new, and exciting form of storytelling that we are kind of at the forefront in this community, bringing it to the world, and that's a beautiful thing.
For sure. All right, well, I think that's going to wrap us up, and I think we had a great conversation about this today. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys are able to comment on about this episode, so head on over, depending on whatever your podcast platform of choice is. Maybe you're listening on Spotify or Apple or whatever. Go over to Wither and Bloom Studios on YouTube. You'll find this podcast posted. Post in the comments there, and hopefully we'll read something of yours next week. I would love to hear how all of you deal with or think about or struggle with role playing and this whole conflict between the acting thing or the improv thing. I think it's a really interesting topic, and I hope today you got something out of this. We love that you listened to us. Both of you, great conversation today.
This was fun.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
That's good. All right, everybody. We will see you next week with another episode. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. All right, everybody. iCast Guidance is produced by Todd Lambrix and Garrett Brennan. Head over to YouTube, where we can be found at Wither and Bloom Studios, where you can see the production of this podcast every Sunday morning live at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Take care.